All right, good morning, everyone. So today, in this session, we'll be talking about health and environment. And first paper would be from Mustashin, and I would like him to take over.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mustasin from West Virginia University, and I'm going to present you the paper, Does Environmental Quality Affect Education? Evidence from Air Quality and School Attendance in the United States. To begin with, our research objective is to explore if air quality pollutants like carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, PM10, and PM2.5 affect students by increasing their chronic absenteeism in school children across the United States. For background, air quality, although air quality has been gradually increasing, but it still has many adverse effects on health, socioeconomic factors, and other educational health conditions. Poor air quality also has significant health effects, including asthma, bronchitis, and other all sorts of things. Air quality also has significant impact on school performances and cognitive ability. And chronic absenteeism impacts dropouts, future earning potential, and other future financial capabilities and cognitive capabilities. So it is kind of important to look why or how chronic absenteeism is affected by air quality. What does the literature say? So one of the foundational studies was done by Curry et al. In 2009, where they looked in 39 largest school districts in Texas and saw that carbon monoxide has a significant effect on school attendance. Similar results were found for PM 2.5. Other studies found it for carbon monoxide, PM10, and nitrogen dioxide as well. One interesting fact, which I would like you to keep in mind, because that will be important going forward, not all papers or like the literature is still divided between the impact of PM10, and we will explore why. And lastly, this paper explores this on a national level. So to the best of our knowledge, most studies are concentrated geographically in certain locations. We try to explore it on a more national level. Okay, so the data we use is school level data from the civil rights data collection, which has chronic absenteeism for the years 2013-14, 15-16, and 17-18. Here on, we'll refer to as year 1, 2, and 3. But what does chronic absenteeism actually mean, right? So chronic absenteeism is when a student is absent from school for more than 15 days in an academic year. That is how we are defining chronic absenteeism. We get the air quality data from the EPA, and we only use the days where the schools are operational. So we deducted the summer months when the school is closed and use the data for the rest of the year. We also have we also used the number of days measure in our regressions, which basically is we looked at the distribution of the air quality. We had two values. One was the daily mean of the air quality, and the other was the daily maximum value of the air quality. We looked into the distribution, we set a median value, and then we looked at the number of days when either the mean or the max was greater than the median value. That's how we created a sort of a bad day measure for us going forward. We also collected county socioeconomic data from the BEA. This is the data summary for the school characteristics. One statistics I would like to bring your attention is the per capita absent by county. This is basically which shows what is the average absenteeism rate, chronic absenteeism rate across the United States. So in year 1, you would see 13.9%. In year 2, you would see 15.3%. In year 3, you would see 15.2%. Going forward, this is how our sample is made up. So the sample in the enrollment sample, we see that majority of the students are white students, followed by Hispanics and Asians and Blacks and so on. For the absenteeism is the same distribution as well. This is the sample that we have in our data set. This is actually the percent of chronic absenteeism by race. So this is just like, so as you can see that Native American in Indians and Alaskan people has the highest rate of chronic absenteeism with almost 25%, followed by Pacific Islanders, and Asian students tends to have the lowest chronic absenteeism rates. This is the air pollution data summary. One key, so as you can see, like on an average in a year, there are about 153 days per county that has like, days that are greater than the median, and it is pretty much similar for all 3 years. We have the carbon monoxides, the nitrogen dioxides. One thing to note is that with PM10 and PM2.5, the mean and the max values are the same. So we are just using one of those values for that. This is to show you the distribution of air quality monitors across the United States and also the corresponding number of days in that county. So as you can see that we have very few air quality monitors for carbon monoxide, which is the same for nitrogen dioxide, PM10, and we have the highest number of measures for PM2.5, which is still not that much. So that is something we are exploring going forward on how to tackle that. Going into the methods, so the first regression we try to run is a panel data random effect regression with state dummies and year dummies. So the model shows your A is the chronic absenteeism, number of students who are chronically absent in school, S in year T. AQ is the air quality component. So we have carbon monoxide, mean days, nitrogen dioxide mean days, and then we have PM10 and PM2.5. We have school level characteristics, which are total enrollment, number of full-time equivalent teachers, and the total school salary expenditure. We have some county level controls, including population of the county and per capita income of the county. This is the results for the first level of regressions. As you can see that air quality is positive and significant across all the different air quality measures except PM10. So if you can recall, the literature is divided, so is our paper. So we are not entirely sure what is happening with PM10 right now, and it needs more work. As you can see, like it does show that carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, PM2.5 does have a significant positive effect in increasing chronic absenteeism in schools. So in interpreting this, if you look at a 1-day increase in the mean number of bad days in a county for carbon monoxide increases chronic absenteeism by almost 0.45 students in a school. A 1-day increase in nitrogen leads to 0.002 students being chronically absent in a school, but it's not significant. A 1-day increase in mean bad PM10 also decreases by 0.014 students per school. That is a curious result, as I was telling you. And PM2.5 also increases chronic absenteeism as expected. Then we tried to incorporate a race angle to the regression, and we have the similar controls as before, but what we introduce here is the beta 4I, which is the race enrollment. So previously we had total enrollment in the regression. Now we divide the enrollment with in terms of race percentages, and the base category being white students. And we also try an interaction term to see what the impact on individual races are due to air quality changes. It still has the same random effect panel data regression with state fixed effect and year dummies. This is the result from that regression, including race. As you can see, air quality components are still like somewhat significant now, and it's still positive except PM10. So it shows that air quality is impacting chronic absenteeism. What is more important here is how race plays a role. So for example, you can see Hispanics enrollment. So if Hispanic enrollment increases by 1%, the impact, the marginal effect on chronic absenteeism would be 0.595 higher than the marginal effect it would have on white students. And in case of the interaction, it's still the same for carbon monoxide, where it will have a greater impact on the Hispanic students than the white students when one bad day for carbon monoxide increases in the second row. So these are like for different races that we have. We can see that The Native American and Alaskan students are also like having a greater impact on chronic absenteeism compared to white students. And all in all, what we can say is that these are the other controls, by the way. So all in all, what we can say is that increase in enrollment percentage of Hispanic and Black students increases chronic absenteeism, while while Asian students decreases compared to white students, and different air quality components affect different races in a different way. So this is what we did, so sort of like a robustness check in a very preliminary stage. So this is a regression that we used the absolute values of the monitors, the average values and the maximum values. And we can see that we get similar results where air quality is positive and significant. PM10, by the way, becomes positive here. So we might need to look into that again. Yeah, so in conclusion, this is a work in progress, very early stages. So we expect a lot of comments and suggestions for this paper. We try to conclude that it is consistent somewhat with the previous literature and has a significant impact on chronic absenteeism. There is also significant disparity in how air quality impacts students of different races. For the next steps, we are thinking of, obviously there is probably an endogeneity problem here, and we will probably look into using an IV in some method, maybe wind direction or something of that sort to counter that endogeneity. We will also explore different data sets, including the NASA aerosol overview depth data set as well, including others. And we also would like to explore a regional and wealth angle to the paper going forward. So thank you. And that was my presentation.
Thank you. So I have a few slides for discussion, and then we can ask him questions if we have any. So I have very few comments. The most important things that I found in this paper was that it has multi-component, there are many things that he has looked into. He has looked into nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and then PM 2.5, PM10. And he has tried to look at the relationship between those and then absenteeism. And also he has tried to look into the heterogeneous impact of the pollutants on student absenteeism. He has looked into the risk factors. So those are the important things. And my suggestion for improvement would be if you could use other metrics such as grades and equity tests, and also if you can use some kind of lag measures, because absenteeism could be in a different day when the pollution could be today, but the absenteeism could be in a different day. And also with the aggregate data, there could be always concern about the ecological validity. So if you can look at more a narrower state of geographical, entity, then that might be even more robust. And also the outdoor air quality and indoor air quality might not be really correlated, in places where they have good air filtration system and all that. So if you can look into that as well, what is the mechanism, so there's air pollution, there's a high air pollution. So why are people not, students not coming to the school? Is it because they are exposed, or are they sick, or are they worried that they will be exposed to the bad air, or what's the mechanism behind it? So if you can look into that, that would be great. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thank you. And any questions you can ask? Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry to cut you off. So the EPA levels in the US, or at least the monitors we have, are all generally below the EPA levels, so considered good days. So you don't get any very. Sorry, what? No, so they have different levels for different air quality components. So carbon monoxide has a level, nitrogen dioxide has a level, but they're like in most US air quality is actually good, right? So in order for us to have like some sort of variation in the thing, like we try to explore a new method, basically. Yes. Yes, okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, no, yeah, we just learned about it like a few days ago. We haven't explored it yet, but thought of like can be a good avenue to explore. Yes, thank you. Yes, please. Mm. Yes, yes, yes. Mm. Yeah, thank you. Nope. Good. Yes. So you may need to add additional rules to get at this because they're using these county fixed effect to control for all of them county level instead of just. Yes, so we thought of using county one. We haven't gone up to it yet. Like we did it for the geographical spatial control. We tried to do a state fixed effect to at least have some sort of geographical anchoring in that process. But yes, thank you. We will definitely try the county fixed effect thing. Yes, sir. Sorry, difference in? Yeah, so previous literature dictates like, so it's like a derived effect, if you may, sort of like if you see a bad air quality day, you tend to like stay home, or like you have some health impacts going on and you don't tend to go to school. So that's like what literature explains so far why chronic absenteeism, like air quality or like environment as a general, can lead to chronic absenteeism. So it's more like from a health angle. Yeah. Well, that is an interesting approach we can think about. Like we haven't thought of that, like whether they get so we were like thinking of it on a more like a general scale, like not on a personal basis, but when exploring the question of why it might happen, we'll have to go like personal. So that time maybe like phone alerts or news, like those things can actually play an important role in determining why this happens. Yes. Whether or not they go to school, they still need the same thing. Stay home, just don't read that. Yeah. And so, questions would be, and I'm sure that somebody's done this work, but you can have a threshold, say, work and going to school or not going to school is kind of anything. Could be that Hispanic folks are more sensitive to that.
Right. So that's thank you so much. Thank you. All excellent comments on the tracks. Any more questions? Yeah, one would be because generally health is better. Besides. There's one thing that we are also together.
Kind of building on that, I don't think you can necessarily set the national level, but you can maybe see changes in air quality, natural effects, forest fires, industry. Yes. Maybe getting that sort of some motivation. Stay home, or maybe if you're going to work, your kid's more likely to not get on the bus.
Ideally, like if we have like AAEA absolute data, which is like a lot of that, but on the national level, but we will probably try to explore different data sets that has the absolute rate, which is a much better indicator.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, two comments. So the first is not something that the speech session, also my research is on actually all my research is on the European country. But I was thinking, what about again extending it in addition to reducing the number of days of absenteeism? What about using the ability to adjust the GAVI concept? Okay, also includes mortality and morbidity due to possibly due to the quality of pollution. Again, complete exercise to validate your plan. And the second is more or less a comment. So the air quality in general correlated with other dimensions of urbanization.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, of course there is industrial pollution. So higher density, but also thinking about also habits, right? Healthy habits.
Right.
Lifestyle.
Right.
The condition for many years, Los Angeles, here that we did much more sedentary life that people in the Midwest and ski, that they don't ski every day, etc. They eat better food. So, and correlated to that, so it's not only a locational issue. That's actually leads me to the third point. What about including if you have child level batteries?
Yes.
Right?
I do. Yes.
For example, these children, these kids would be affected by previous
Health
issues like diabetes, etc. And also, their absenteeism could be correlated to the mother characteristics. So if they are less healthy, then they transmit the bad lifestyle, bad health habits to the kids, and these kids, and they don't maybe even value the that much.
Right.
So it's easy for them to just pull out of school whenever something happens. Right? So I think there are some company factors that might be biased in the relationship between the air quality and your earth. It would be nice to expand this idea into control in general. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mustasin. I think it's my turn now. So let me. Okay, yeah, you can. Oh, thank you. So. Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to present a. Sorry. Okay. So today I'm going to present. Oh, it's my own echo. So My paper is about the distributional effects of exposure to CAFOs, and it is a case study of large dairy farms in New Mexico. So first of all, what is CAFO? CAFO is stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. It is any animal farm operation that has more than 1,000 animal units. And for dairy farms, it is more than 700 cows. And also, for the purpose of regulation, EPA regards any animal farm operation that discharges wastewater into a waterway also as a CAFO. And CAFOs, like they started to be more popular after 1950s, and then the dairy farms started to adopt like CAFO practices starting in the 70s. And in New Mexico, this growth or proliferation of dairy farms started in the early 90s. So what is environmental justice? You guys might already know, but still I just want to touch upon that. It is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So environmental justice means like every people of any race, color, should have equal say on the issues that affect them, like environmental issues or like any kind of policies that can have like a secondary effect. So let's go into the objective of my research. The purpose of my research is to examine the association between environmental justice indicators and the exposure to pollutants from large dairy farms in New Mexico at multiple spatial temporal dimensions. So basically, I want to look at like if there's any kind of relationship between being close to the, like if there is like some kind of disparity between proximity to dairy farms and various, like environmental justice indicators. Okay, so what does the literature say? The literature says that, CAFOs are located in localities where there's higher proportion of population of color and low-income population. And most of these studies are centered on like hog farms in Midwest and also southern and eastern states. They haven't really looked into the Southwest US. And also, as I already said, like these studies have found that there's some kind of correlation between poverty and substantial minority populations with the presence of CAFOs. And they have come up with two different mechanisms. One is the disparate siting and the other one is residential sorting. So disparate siting means these farms, they come to the places where there's like higher proportion of low income or minority population, because it could be due to various reasons. It could be economically more, like it might make more sense because the land prices could be cheaper there, or like because those people have less voices, like they might not oppose the location, like they might not oppose the dairy farms like practices because they are not politically as aware or like conscious, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but like they might not voice their concerns as strong as people of like, like people are more privileged, who are more privileged, right? So what will be the contribution of this paper to the literature? So I'll be focusing on dairy farms. I haven't found like literature that has looked into the dairy farms and environmental justice. So this will be the first paper to look into that. And also in terms of the geography, Southwestern US has not been looked into. So this will be not just for New Mexico, but also for California, Idaho, Utah, like those places where the dairy farm has been growing since the 90s. And I'll be using precise location, actual number of livestock, and high resolution data of pollution concentration. And I've also constructed this index of concentration at the extremes, which is a really robust measure of structural racism or structural inequity. And I'll compare the easy indicators before and after the intensification of dairy farms. So starting 1990s, like dairy farms from California and other different states started to come to New Mexico because of the cheaper land prices and I guess lax regulation, and also the climate, because climate there is more dry, right? So you don't have to, because the animal waste don't really go to the surface water because there's less rainfall, right? So in the Midwest, that's a problem. And you can be fined if your like waste goes to the mixes with the river water, right? So they tried to come to places where that was not a concern. So farms from different part of the US came to New Mexico. There were already farms, but 1990 was the point when like farms, the size of the farm as well as the number of farms started to grow in New Mexico. And this graph kind of shows that. We can see that this is the average stocking density of large dairy farms, which means basically like how many cows are there per large dairy farms in each of these states. These are the 12 largest dairy states in the US. And as you can see, New Mexico has the largest density of cows per farm. So not only New Mexico has large number of dairy cows, they also have like the most spatially concentrated, or like most, like the dairy farms with the highest number of cows. Basically, like the dairy farms are bigger than in other states. And it is like the top, I think it's the 9th state right now, like in terms of like number of dairy farms, but in terms of the density of cows per farm, it is the first, like it ranks on the top. So that's also the reason that I chose New Mexico for this study. So how do I assess the disproportionate exposure? So the assessment of the association between exposure metrics and EASA indicators across time and space. So I use this is basically a correlational study. I don't have like a causational angle right now, but I'll explore that further later. I'll be using 3 different exposure metrics. One is the count-based method, the second is the buffer-based method, and the third is ammonia concentration. And this is based on the satellite data. For the buffer method, I calculate this area-weighted number of K-foods within 3 miles of a dairy farm. So basically what I do is like I construct this, I draw this circle around a dairy farm, and based on how much percentage of that circle is inside one census tract, I assign that to that particular census tract, and then like I just divide the number of cows based on the proportion of the circle in each of those census tracts. And I've created this index of concentration at the extremes. So how I constructed this is I is equals to A minus P over T, where A is the number of people belonging to privileged group, P is the number of people belonging to deprived group, and T is the total population. So what this looks into is like, if we look at the Gini coefficient, right, it only looks into one measure, like it's like one dimensional measure of inequity, but ICE is more like a 2-dimensional measure because it also looks at privileged and deprived group at the same time. So there's less concern for, like collinearity, like if you're using both of these variables, in this variable kind of takes into account both of these variables at the same time without any concern for collinearity, multi-collinearity. And the data that I've used comes from 3 different sources. The dairy farm data comes from New Mexico Environment Department, and we digitized the discharge permit records from them. And the data is that I used is dairy farm address and discharge volume. I basically converted discharge volume to number of cows using a formula that they provided to me. And then the demographic data comes from the Census Bureau. And I use this because this census tract boundaries change over time, right? So I had to use this homogenized or harmonized data that kind of takes into account the changing boundaries of census tracts. And I created 7 different environmental justice indicators. The ammonia data comes from European Space Agency, which was used by Van Dam et al. In 2018. And this is at a spatial resolution of 0.01 degrees. And I averaged it across census tracts because that's the resolution that I have for the census data. So what are the environmental justice indicators that I've used? There are 2 different kinds of environmental justice indicators that I've used here. One is for race and ethnicity, the other one is for socioeconomic status. I've used the percentage of Hispanic at census tract, percentage of non-Hispanic white, percentage of foreign born, and then index of concentration at the extreme for race. And then for socioeconomic status, I've used median household income, percentage below the poverty level, and median home value. So let's look at this map, proportional circle map of dairy farms in New Mexico, where bigger circle means bigger dairy farm, and then smaller circle means smaller dairy farms, right? So basically the dairy farms are located in the southeastern corner of the state. Okay, thank you. And if we look at this ammonia concentration map, the satellite data, it also shows the exact same kind of pattern here. Wherever there is the large dairy farm, there is large concentration of ammonia. And these are the different summary statistics. I won't go over them. Like this basically shows that there's large, like range of these variables. And if we look at this, we can see that so here, the blue one, or the, I don't know, teal color or the aquamarine color is for the census tract that don't have dairy farms, and then the mustard color is for the census tracts that have dairy farms. And the dotted ones are for 1990, and then the bricks are for 2019, right? So if we look at the percentage of white in the census tracts with dairy farms, it has decreased over time. And then for the Hispanic, it has increased over time. And like although the percentage of Hispanic has increased in both the census tracts with dairy farms and without dairy farms, we will see later that they have increased more in the census tract that has dairy farms. And then for other measures, it kind of makes sense that census tracts with dairy farms will have higher proportion of people with less high school, because like in rural counties, that's always the case, right? And then also with poverty, it shows a similar kind of relationship. Wherever there's large number of dairy farms, there's more. I mean, it's not a really starking difference though. And let me see. And then the median household income is kind of, it doesn't say much, so I will go into the other table here. So here we can see that the first two column is for the count measure, the second two column is for the buffer measure, and the third column is for the ammonia. And we can see that the use of ammonia data has more, like shows more robust relationship than the count or buffer method. So it kind of like supports whatever I have been asserting before, right? Wherever there is higher number of dairy cows, there are more inequities, whether it be in terms of like percentage of foreign born, percentage of Hispanic, for eyes for race. So minus 0.29 means there's higher disparity. So there's higher proportion of people, deprived population. In this case, like higher percentage of Hispanic population compared to the white population. And if we look at the percentage below high school, we can see that there's a higher proportion of people with education below high school in census tracts that is higher concentration of ammonia. And median home value is lower in areas with dairy farms, but that's kind of like not a surprising result because it's in rural part of the state. So to conclude, we can see that the disadvantaged demographic groups disproportionately exposed to the pollution across dairy intensive regions. And this has increased over time. You can see that the percentage of Hispanic, non-Hispanic white has decreased, and the Hispanic population has increased in those areas. And then ethnicity, immigration status, and education level are the significant indicators here. And the actual ammonia concentration metric demonstrate a greater disparity than the proxy measures. So one of the contributions is that we can use the satellite data to see the disproportionate effect, which has not been done by the previous studies that I've looked into. So that would be one of the way to like more accurately measure this disproportionate effect. And what are the limitations and future directions? Like there are a lot of limitations of this study. One is that I've used the aggregate data of demographic variables. It is not individual level data. So there's a concern of ecological validity, and the results are correlational or cross-sectional. And then also the mechanism is not identified. And like for the future direction, for the policy making, if the policymakers can integrate this health and environmental equity considerations into their policies, then that would maybe help to reduce these inequities. And also some of the studies have shown that we don't really have to do anything special, like even if we decrease the pollution, like overall pollution, that will like ultimately help these people of color or minority population, because thank you, because most of this pollution is located in those localities, right? So if we just try to reduce the overall pollution, that will ultimately benefit those people who are who are minority or low income. And also I'm trying to look into this solution. What could be the solution to reduce this? Because like shutting down these dairy farms is not a solution, right? Because the livelihood of people depends on that. So what could be different ways to solve this? And I'm trying to look into like the bioenergy production, because one benefit of that is like it will kind of decrease the pollutant emissions of the pollutant in the open field, right? We'll try to like capture all the methane and all the other air pollutants, and also the nutrient profile of this digested, we call them digested, is more stable than just the manure. So it will not leach into the water as much as the manure itself. So there's a lot of like environmental benefits, and also because we'll be capturing the volatile methane, right? We will get some kind of carbon credits for that. So I'm trying to look into like if you can make this more like economically feasible, and what could be the different ways, like there could be some kind of subsidies, or like if the voluntary carbon market can itself solve this problem. And that is my another chapter, and I'm trying to look into like how viable that is. So thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, you can just.
Thank you, Suraj. Like, I just have like 2 slides, just formality as soon as this opens up, that is. Yeah, I think it was a good read, like an interesting topic, and I find like this is a very timely, a very good time to ask the question. You have already gone to the presentation, so I won't spend some time. So I'll just move on to my few suggestions that I have. So as you already said, you just looked at correlation. So I feel like the next logical step is to go for causation and like asking for causal relationships. So maybe start off with a regression model and then move forward from there by controlling different variables in the model. Also, there may be endogeneity present. You alluded to the fact that since land prices are lower on these people, so whether like people come here because of the land prices or the farms come here because of the low land prices to begin with, I mean, that's something that will be interesting to explore. And you can also like, I feel like do a difference in difference model going forward, because we have like specific things that you can measure before and after. So these are like very few things that I had to share. Thank you so much. Open for questions, please.
Yeah, the reason I didn't look into that was because of the limitation of the data, because I don't have complete set of information for the dairy farms before, like 2010, basically. There's like, we are still digitizing those permits. So as soon as we have all the complete set of data for like, like from 2010 to 1980 or something, then we can run this difference in difference models and see like, because we have the data for the opening of the farms and also the closure of the farms if there were any. So it will be really interesting, like data set to look into, but we don't have a complete information at this point. So we cannot really do a difference in difference, but that's a really good point. Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So the main. Yeah, I looked into that, and also because if we look at the Native American population are more like concentrated in those reservation areas, right? And they don't have any dairy farms there. So I can't really find any kind of disparity between, Native American population and the presence of dairy farms, at least in New Mexico. I don't know about like other states. And I think that's the case with other states too, but I cannot say for sure, like, because they are like kind of like the Native American population in New Mexico, they are more located towards like northwest, and these are like more southeast, like they're way apart. Yes. Yes. And also like even if I look at the, I don't think so. Yeah. So yeah, I'll look into that. Thank you.
You also have information about the actual population counts. It was interesting to show that the Hispanic population is growing. That's more of those folks doing it, or the population is decreasing, or is it
Yeah, I can look into that. Like I have that information, but I don't know exactly for sure. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
some association with the high positive data and different association with large value negative. So and you would be able to tell certain environmental justice implications values are small. So it seemed like it had to do express sets of association.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
One for positive,
mhm.
unless you're the absolute.
Yeah, I did this like for the ice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 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 So what we're doing here is like we are basically correlating, like looking at the correlation between the ice value and then the presence of dairy farm, right? So if the value is negative, that means wherever there is dairy farm, there's higher percentage of deprived population, or like there's more social polarization. And if it was more positive, right, then it would be like like the privileged population is at like in higher proportion in those places. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult to like explain it, but yeah, yeah. Thank you. I'll try to make it more like comprehensive, like comprehensible later. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, following up on this, this is the first time that I see it. How is that different from, let's say, from GSX or airfield or index? Because it's interesting to, because the geography looks a different point of the distribution. Right?
Yes.
So how is that compared? Yeah, again, I'm not familiar, so they can't understand the intuition behind it.
Yeah, so
if you can give us
yeah, basically they're trying to look into the polarization between the deprived and privileged group. And for this, like the data, we don't really need a comprehensive data, like we just need the population of the deprived and privileged and underprivileged group, right? And because I was trying to construct all the different indexes, like the racial segregation index or like a residential isolation index. For those indexes, like I needed more, like the data was not basically available, like I needed more, because at census tract level, like in New Mexico, like the population is not, I mean, they are standardized, but still like, they don't provide all the information for like the information that I need to construct those. They provide it for like the urban areas, but not for the rural areas. So I couldn't construct those indexes. And for Gini coefficient, I mean, I basically look into the literature and they say it's better, but I don't have like, experience at this time because I don't remember it exactly. But yeah, thank you. It's,
there's a paper in they look at concept facilities in Los Angeles County. And using aggregate data census tract level.
Okay.
There's sorting behavior in the housing market that's leading to disproportionate exposure among Hispanic residents relative to white residents.
Okay.
And the paper is useful for a couple of ways. One, they show how to develop the sort of that's that hypothesis. And then two, they show that doing a they don't show that, but there are other arguments that we can't do differences. There's like differentiation problem because you can't track individual.
That's true.
So like we really do have to do something like this sort of thing. So in terms of doing like causal analysis,
Yeah.
framework.
Yeah, that's the main thing because I couldn't find any kind of causal analysis. I mean, yeah, not that I could use for this study, you know. So I'm trying to explore it more. And thank you for your.
Yeah, so like for your next paper, I was doing something. I was also interested in this disproportionate exposure to brownfield
Uh-huh.
and I was going to do difference analysis and on paper.
Okay.
They show with some simulated data, trying to do like that style of analysis, and actually we can get remarkably different results from like the same underlying data because it's an identification.
That's true.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
yeah.
What's your name again? Your name?
Max.
Max. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure, yeah. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I have one maybe comment here, since the session is in health and environment. So we often think that, of course, in this case, user is capital, right? But we assign large data pollution in general, a negative effect, which is, of course, is there because it's the environment. On the other side, though, I think we should put a little bit more weight on the benefits, because if there are no large baselines there, then people will eat dairy products, which is actually very good for a half-life, right? So protein and something for kids, etc. Increase probably the activities later in life. So I would put more emphasis on the positive aspect. Of course, again, pollution is negative. That's true. Understand the social and environmental perspective, mental justice, etc. But we should think of maybe more expanded model where we also take account of the potential benefits. I don't want to produce everything because of dairy farms. Don't get me wrong. Having perishable product nearby actually good for your health.
Yeah, there are some studies that have looked into that. I don't remember exactly. There's like different ways to look into the environmental justice, like distributional justice, and I don't remember those. Like there's two different kinds. So in one of them, like they look into the benefit sharing as well as disadvantages. So yeah, I mean I can incorporate that into the framework.
No, maybe because you want.
Yeah, it's not in this paper. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. Okay, so here we are a little bit shifting location and shifting topic. So I would love you to have you here, but I won't get offended if you want to leave because we are changing. Yeah, it was the last minute because I need to catch a flight, so I was moved into this session. So I won't be talking about health. I will be mostly talking about the effect on the environment on labor intensity. And I said that I was shifting gear because we are going to Africa now. So we are abandon the US for a second, and so we are looking at how variability and extreme shocks in the African continent are affecting the labor intensity, the differential labor intensity between men and women. This is a collaborative work with a collaborator who is now at the World Bank, but used to be at FAO at the time of writing this paper. So some background and some literature. So there are so the first issue that we came across when we look at labor data worldwide, I mean globally, is that we need to have a consistent and reliable cross-country estimates given the importance of agriculture. I mean, both, of course, for poverty reduction, but also
in general, especially in developing countries, because if you think about the importance, it's, only in Africa, there are more than 200 million people engaged in agriculture, out of 1.2 billion people in overall. So this is a sizable sector. Why I'm saying that we need to consistent, reliable cross-country estimate is because we usually, when we look at a statistic on labor, we usually look at 1 hour over the last week. And this is how we define involvement in that sector. But we think, and that's, we have a companion paper on this, that this definition of looking at 1 hour masks a lot of underemployment, especially in informal setting, in rural informal setting, developing countries. So here we're proposing a measure based on essential intensity. We will look at all intensity and not the dummy variable if you're employed or not, if you spend 1 hour or not in a specific sector over the last week. I mean, especially in Africa, but of course globally, agriculture employment is mostly seasonal in nature because of the agricultural cycle. And on top of that, it's strongly affected by climate because I mean there are I mean again, especially in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, there is weather variability that is increasing. I will show you in a second how, and also there are extreme shocks like heat waves, or drought, or flood that can affect agricultural seasonality, not only the normal seasonality, but also can exacerbate the effects of the seasonality. And this seasonality also lead to heterogeneity of livelihoods and what we call occupational multiplicity, because during the hungry season, then people mostly look at non-farm employment. So they have maybe a shop on the back of their house or their homestead where they sell or they resell goods, mostly maybe groceries or goods coming from maybe livestock, small livestock production. So seasonality as climate, seasonality and climate can lead to heterogeneity of livelihoods and diversification rather than specialization. Africa, there is literature that points that Africa being exposed to more severe climate change condition than other countries, than other parts of the world, most also due to other effects. If you think about El Nino or La Nina as well. So they also come to, so they are originated from the US and the Gulf of Mexico, etc. But they also affect large parts in East and Southern Africa because of the change in ocean temperature. And under this framework, then women have a higher degree of vulnerability to climate change and extreme weather events due to a mix of factors, not because they are women versus men, not just because of the biological reason, but especially in Africa because of intra-household gender-specific division of labor. Lack of access to input, if you think about fertilizer, if you think about seeds, if you think about credit, wealth, and also due to cultural norms. So there are different socioeconomic constraints that limit the involvement of women into productive agriculture labor, and that's why they're facing higher degree of vulnerability than men. And usually government-led intervention, but also projects coming from international institutions, multilateral donors, fail to address adaptation strategies because they are usually we call it gender blind. So they don't look at gender as an important factor in targeting, in reaching and benefiting people in Africa, but also in other countries again. And this actually risk even increasing pre-existing gender inequalities in the household. So the question that we would like to answer, well, I said at the beginning, is that we would like to quantify the effects of weather variability and extreme shocks on gender differential, sex-specific differential employment intensity, especially in agriculture, but we'll also present, well, in the paper, we also have estimates on non-agriculture, but we would like to focus on agriculture as the main mechanism through which the effects of climate change impact labor. And then as a corollary, if you want to, again, we have the companion paper, where we look at, and also in this paper, we look at not the decision of participation as a 0-1, so I don't participate in the labor market, or I participate, but also, or I participate, but just for 1 hour, the minimum of 1 hour, but also we will look at 10 versus 20 hours per week as a definition of part-time, let's say, versus full-time. I mean, I know that in developing countries, let's say we use a threshold of 40 hours a week for full-time. So 20 hours per week is roughly part-time, and 10 hours is a half, let's say, of part-time. But if you think about working in this kind of setting, rural development settings, and even 10 hours of productive work is a lot, because then they spend other hours in taking care of household chores and responsibilities. So the data, we use two types of data. One type is at the household level. And the household level, we use a data set that we put together that is roughly 2.2 million observations, 730,000 for employed individuals. And these data set come from mostly from labor force service, but also from household income and consumption expenditure service in 31 African countries that represent 80% of the whole population in Africa. And these data sets are collected in different points in time for different countries, but have been collected in the time window between 2014 and 2019. So they are all nationally representative. So we can provide inference for more than 900 million people in Africa. So we look at individual work intensity in main job and sometimes in secondary jobs, but we look at both formal and informal. So here, think about engagement more than employment. So if I'm engaged in agriculture, or if I'm engaged in non-agriculture over the last week, but to categorize whether I'm involved in agriculture and agriculture, we use what is the information of the main job. But in reality, in looking at the number of hours, we look at all jobs, whether formal or informal, whether it's, again, one or two jobs. And then we use a spatial data. So we match the lowest admin level available from the survey. I mean, for some surveys, we have the specific GPS coordinates of the household, although they are set for confidentiality reasons. For some other surveys, we have district level, so administrative level 2. For some other household, we use administrative level 1, so that is region. Depending on the survey, because the survey are a little bit different, but they have a similar quality and similar phrasing of the question to be comparable. And we match this with a biophysical dimension, mostly essentially temperature and precipitation, and the sources were clean. So this is the coverage of countries. So in dark blue, we have the countries covered by LFS, so the labor force surveys. In light blue, we have the countries covered by household income and expenditure surveys. Although this differentiation is a little bit, artificial, because also in household income and expenditure surveys, they use a question that they use in the labor force survey. So that's why we can put in the map, because this information, these surveys are indeed comparable. And on the map on the right, we are showing the percentage of population, the adult population, so 15 years old and over, in Africa by administrative level 1, which is the stratum at which each survey is representative. So we're not going lower than this because otherwise the values won't be representative of the underlying population. As you can see, we have a higher participation, for example, in Mozambique, in Madagascar, in Tanzania, and also in some countries in West Africa. Although, of course, you need to think about, well, we put employment, but in reality, it's really engagement in that particular, in a labor market, so in productive work. So not in domestic work, but in productive work. So this just to give you an idea of what we are talking about. So some descriptive statistics. So labor market participation, we divided in 3 areas. We divided Africa in 3 areas, so North, Western, Central, and Eastern, Southern. Although for North, we are not, as you can see here, we are just representing Tunisia and Egypt. So maybe it's better to, to qualify these results in the light of the fact that we just have 2 countries. But in any case, this is the difference between participation, sex-specific participation in the labor market. As you can see, female labor participation is always lower than male participation. Essentially, if you take out the Tunisia and Egypt, then the difference is about 15 percentage points. And in any case, in Tunisia and Egypt, the male participation is much, much higher than female participation, maybe for customary role, for habits, then we have average age. And here we can see some differences. Sorry, I didn't put the statistical significance of the bars, but they're all statistical significant except the Eastern Southern over there. Again, the average age is higher for male than female in all areas except in Eastern Southern, where there is no difference in age of the worker by sex. And this is a sectoral distribution, and I think that's very interesting because there is a stark sectoral diversity depending on the region in Africa. So as you can see, in the north, female, although the participation of female is lower in general, the participation in crop production is higher for female than for male. The opposite occurs in Western Central Africa. And again, resurface the higher participation of female in crop production is also present in Eastern Southern Africa. Livestock is a very minor component within agriculture. And then we have as maybe reflected by the level of maybe industrialization, is that we have an industry that is a gray sector where the males are more participating more in North Africa versus the other areas. And finally, we have services that are more developed, let's say, in North Africa compared to West Central and Eastern Southern. So again, this is just to give you the picture that Africa is not one continent homogeneous, but it's very different in terms of sectoral composition. The average weekly hours in agriculture are higher for male. So despite having the lowest male agricultural participation in North Africa, we have the highest number of hours worked compared to the other areas, right? So North Africa has the lowest male agricultural participation, but has the highest number of hours worked. So let's say there are fewer male working, but they work for a larger number of hours. What the variability, that's the other component let's say on the right-hand side. On the left, we have the annual annual temperature over the last, let's say, 40 years, from 79 to 2019. And as you can see, so this is a smoothed non-parametric to just give you an idea of the trend. There is an upward trend in temperature. And then again, this is across all Africa. For precipitation, we have a downward trend, although it's pretty much constant, has been constant over the last 15 years. But over the last 15 years, also we had an increase in variability of precipitation. So in general, there's increase in temperature, decrease in precipitation, and increase in precipitation variability in the last decade or so. In fact, this is also signaled here in the map on the right, where we show the coefficient of variation of precipitation, and the areas marked in red have the highest are associated with the highest coefficient of variation of precipitation. So essentially it's the West Africa area plus the Eastern Southern Africa tropic, warm and arid, semi-arid, also including the coast of Madagascar. Yes, oh, well, I need to rush then. So time intensity and weather shocks, I mean, I will gloss over here, but this is a distribution of the weather shocks events. So we look at the distribution of the long-term distribution of rainfall and long-term distribution of over the 40 years of temperature. And we defined shock as whether the monthly data, the monthly value has been higher than 2 standard deviation from the long-term average, below or above, or so minus 2 standard deviation from the mean, to look at heat waves, for example, if you look at temperature, but then if you look at precipitation, look at droughts on the left side, and then floods on the right side of the distribution, if the value is higher than 2 standard deviation. We can see there's some effects of, for example, overall El Nino there in the heat waves in the coast of Eastern Southern Africa, as I was saying, and in some districts in Kenya and Tanzania, while floods is a little bit more spatially dispersed. I mean, some floods in Nigeria, for example. In specific site-specific employment weather shocks, I mean, essentially so sorry here, the title didn't come out well, but this is West Africa at the top, and then here is Eastern Southern Africa at the bottom. So the message is essentially that women are more likely to be engaged in agriculture than men in shock-affected areas. In fact, the bar for women is always higher than the bar for men in shock-affected areas. Yeah, so well, that's a corollary of what I'm saying. So this is the individuals who are involved in agriculture work 5.5 fewer hours in a week in unaffected areas, while in drought-affected areas, individuals work 2 hours less than individuals in non-drought areas. But that's not what so I don't have time to go into that. So let me go to the method. So the method is essentially is a seemingly unrelated regression equation where we look at agriculture and agriculture sector, and we allow the error terms to be correlated between the two, because we think that there is a correlation of work intensity between agriculture and non-agriculture. So it's not one. So I don't just work in agriculture, work in non-agriculture, but I work in both. And the error terms are correlated because there are some characteristics that are common between the two. So that's why we don't use OLS, but we use the similarity estimators. And also because this estimator is expected to lead to more efficient parameter estimate. And the difference between these two equations is just that here we look at individual, and there, yes, and the second equation we look at households, and the third equation we still look at individuals, but interacted with the gender of the worker. So so here there are results. So overall, where the variability reduces the total number of hours worked in agriculture, this is the coefficient of variation in temperature. We have a negative coefficient there. Heat waves and drought reduce the individual hours worked by roughly 40% and 14%. Yeah, the coefficient estimate is 0.5 because of the transformation. It's a log linear. But in any case, the effect we calculated is 40% and 14%. And similar effect are found at the household level on the regression on the right panel, the figures, although with a lower level of precision. So here, there are interesting the fact that we would like to highlight is that being here there are the second set of regression. So interacted, the weather shocks are interacted with the gender of the worker. So the interesting here is that to notice that being a female farmer reduced the negative impact of heat wave on work intensity. Now the coefficient once interacted becomes positive, right? And that's a good news. We have a lower effect in Eastern Southern Africa, so there is a heterogeneous effect of being a female farmer, and also we have on the other hand we have a much higher effect, so a much higher reduction of this effect in West Africa if you are a female farmer. Conclusions. Participation in the labor market in the 31 countries that we analyzed is higher among men than women, as I said, roughly 15 percentage point, with agriculture being the dominant sector. In East and Southern Africa, women participation in the labor market is higher in agriculture than in agriculture. So we are talking about 62 versus 38, while in other areas, for example, in West and Southern Africa, the balance, the participation is almost equal between the agriculture and agriculture. In Africa, both heat waves and droughts reduce the number of hours worked by 40%, and this effect is particularly severe in West Africa. Sorry. Then the important effect that we would like to test in the paper is that there is strong evidence of site-specific effects. So being a female farmer reduces this negative impact of heat waves on work intensity by 40%. And finally, to test rigorously and comprehensively this effect, we need to look at women's time use. So not only we should look at labor intensity in agriculture, but also we look at the chores, the household chores, the domestic, non-productive, let's say, work that women perform in households to be able to capture the full effects. Well, and finally, we need sustainable, climate resilient, gender sensitive policy to look at these issues, look at gender issues. Future research, and I conclude here. The role of agricultural technologies, can they mitigate the negative effect of shocks, especially again on women, reducing their time burden? And can they increase their decision-making power, their productive work in general, their empowerment? You think about the role of middleman or the role of mechanization that can totally bypass women. Then we need to pay attention to this phenomena, and also we need to pay attention to the gender digital divide in these areas, because this relates to access to information and inputs that women have lower access to. For example, to cell phone, or when they are not cell phone, then the men are controlling them. So, and this increases the digital divide and potentially exacerbate the effect of climate change because of this lack of information. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we have the 2 slides of comments. Okay. So yeah, it's a open discussion. And yes.
Thank you. That was extremely interesting, especially like better. So I just want to clarify. So basically, what you're finding is that it is like labor supply is less elastic to a weather shock than men.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right? Just like, is it good that they're not losing labor relative to men, or is it somehow indicative that they're more vulnerable, that they can't like kind of adjust in bad weather and they're still, because I'm also thinking like maybe if you're working in Africa, there's health implications of that. And yeah, so I feel like just the one question that's left hanging for me is this good or bad? Like, and as a policy implication, then that doesn't matter, right? Like, do we want to like have men's labor supply or have to go to women, or have women be responsible like men? And yeah, so but I thought this was really, really intriguing and compelling.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for the question. Actually, we thought about this a lot with the micro-author, because what we were thinking is that, okay, but in doing this study, we are implicitly assuming that working more is better, right? So that's why we take the angle, okay, women are disadvantaged because they work less. But then maybe nobody is telling us that they're disadvantaged because they work less, maybe because they want to work less, right? So I will be here, I will be a little bit controversial here, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to work less, because maybe they can have leisure. Well, not in this, of course, not in this setting, because we know that in this setting they're not having leisure, but they're taking care of household chores. And that's why I said in the conclusion that to analyze these issues, we need to have the complete full model of women's time use, but also men's time use, to see what they really do during the day. Because the different thing is to have free time. Another thing is to have if not to be, let's say, in productive work because you need to attend to kids or elderly or household chores. So yeah, definitely the welfare implications need to be analyzed. It's an hanging question, I understand. With this kind of data, though, especially with the labor force surveys, it's a little bit difficult because we have a measure of income at the household level, but it's not always, it's collected with a lot of measurement error, I would say, because it's just one question: how much is your income? And it's very likely to be underreported for obvious reasons. On the other hand, from the household income and expenditure surveys, we might have a better measure of income. Something else that we are doing is, I was involved in a project, at Federal Bank, looking at the income generating activities. And we do have information of, what we are trying to do, building upon that, and the project is to look at the contribution of individual contribution of household members to household income, right? So we do have the employment, for example, module that is collected at the individual level. We do have who is responsible for that particular plot, and we have the sales and the own consumption for that particular plot. So we know the income generated at the plot and the ID of the person associated to the plot. So we can relate this income to the gender of the decision maker. Same thing for livestock. We know who is the manager of livestock, who is rearing livestock. So potentially we can break down all the sources of income by the specific household members who takes the decision. And this way we can look at the intra-household contribution to household income. From each individual to household income. But yeah, that's.
Unless you actually have an employee, right? You're so economic, resource constrained that it's a hurricane now, you have to go work anyway, even though there's a cost to your health and well-being, right? And so,
Yeah, so we had a similar study just looking at Tanzania, and we look at the labor allocation after shock, and it came out, because we had panel data, and it came out that when there was a heat wave in Tanzania, then women kept working while men reduced the amount of work, because and there's also some literature, maybe you're more expert than me on this, of course, that says that women can withstand heat better than men. So biologically, so maybe that's why they don't, after a shock, they don't decrease their labor effort in agriculture while men do. Yeah, that's what we found in Tanzania. And that's actually what we find also here, that it's inelastic to shocks.
When you say during an external shock, more women are working, so is it like the women are already working and they continue to work while men go away, or it's like they're for example, my experience in developing countries like Bangladesh, for example, when we have floods, we usually see the men migrating like cities in search of work while the woman has to stay back and look at their agriculture. So that is one question. And the second question is there a sort of a dominant effect, like a male forcing the female to be working during those harsh conditions or not? You already explained a bit of that, just curiosity.
Yeah, no, that's good that you ask, because we thought so. Here, unfortunately, what we are missing, and in the next iteration of the paper we will be adding, is that we are just looking at intensity of workers, work intensity of people who are already working. So, so we just look at whether they decrease or increase their effort after a shock. But yeah, that's a relevant question. So do new workers or new people are get involved into the activity once there is a shock, or just there are the old involved, there are people involved that they're varying their effort intensity. We don't know because we just look at people who are working, but yeah, definitely we need to look at the participation. In the companion paper, we do it exactly that using a double hurdle model. So we look at after a shock, well, we look at also a shock and the family structure and how this affects participation. And once an individual has overcome the hurdle of participating in the labor market, then we look at intensity. But the first obstacle is actually looking at what are the characteristics that hamper the participation in the first place. And weather variability and extreme shocks is one of these obstacles. But mostly what we found in the other papers is that what hampers women participation is mostly demographic structure of the family. So the number of children younger than 15 and the number of elderly over 70 is a very strong determinant of participation. So the first obstacle that women need to overcome to participate in the labor market is family structure. So essentially, there is a competing time demands. So either they take care of household chores or they do productive work. But yeah, that's in the companion paper. Yeah, and then yeah, unfortunately, we don't have information on the migration of household members because you're right. So women could be forced into staying in the household because men migrate to look for better job opportunities in case of shocks. Unfortunately, again, we don't have this information on migration in this data set because it's, again, labor for service, but in specific service where we do have, actually would be interesting to know. And again, what we're advocating is looking at time use collected at individual level to see what really people are doing in their daily life. So, and migration is one of, seasonal migration or circular migration, right? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, more, yeah, no, good. More than available is they are involved more in, yeah. Oops. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, no, go ahead, sorry. No, okay, yeah, that's interesting. So what you're suggesting here is not just looking at work intensity in a specific sector. What we did right now is to just, again, allow the error terms to be correlated between agriculture and agriculture. But what you're suggesting is to look at, sorry, still, so what you're suggesting is to look at how the sources of income can differ according to the sex of the worker, essentially. Okay. Okay, so we'll be on the left-hand side. So how let's say weather shocks can differentially affect the sectoral involvement, specific sectoral involvement. Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. Thanks. Okay, I don't know if there are any other questions. Actually, I don't know what's the time either. Ah, time is up. Okay.